myth was a fly with the bugs and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry. But
Do you prefer Renee or Renee?
Renee or Gartz, or just call me anything but late for dinner, really. What a great way to start the show. Welcome to the show with no name. The boys have left me to go to the boxing. I didn't even get a start, but I'm joined by our favourite South African, Glyn Schofield. How are you?
Yeah, Renee, good, thanks.
First and foremost, 2 grandkids in 2 weeks. Congratulations.
Yeah. So one yesterday and one on the 9th and the 23rd, I think it was, yeah.
Wow, you must be so... And 2 boys?
Yeah, 2 boys, yeah.
Yes, and straight into jockey world, or...?
Oh, well, both their dad... Well, Luke's 6'4".
Oh.
So I don't think...
Could be some concerns there.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a jock. And then Chad had another boy, so possibility there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So whether 1 out of the 2 is not bad. Yeah, perfect. Hey, amazing career, and I'm fairly new into sort of learning about the horse racing industry, and I'm probably what you'd call a casual punter.
Doesn't matter. In horse racing, you can be in it for 2 minutes and become an expert.
Well, yeah, that's
There's
what I tell
loads
my
of them.
partner every
Yeah.
weekend, because he studies the form guides, studies the horses, and gets the extreme shits with me when I have a better day than him, but you can't celebrate the wins when they're losing more money than you.
Of course you can.
Yeah, thank you. See,
Just
then
buy
he said I could.
Just buy a better bottle of wine.
Yeah, facts. With all the career that you had, where did it begin for you? Because you were born in England, and then South Africa was where you sort of
Grew up.
buttered your bread?
Yeah, I obviously moved to South Africa when I was a tiny kid.
Yeah.
So South Africa's obviously has always been home where I grew up, and had no connections to horse racing. I saw a TV program about the Jockey Academy in South Africa, and said to my parents, I said, "Oh, that looks like fun. I think I'll have a crack at that." I don't think I'd ever slept a night away from home, and they thought, okay. And then when you go to the Jockey Academy, when you get accepted, you leave there and then, and you're gone for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I left home when I was 14, and went into the Jockey Academy. I was one of 47, I think, 47 boys that they took in that year.
Yep.
And I think, they dwindle and drop out. And I think at the end of the year we had like 11 left.
Were your parents ever hesitant to send you away at 14?
They were just happy to get rid of me.
Yeah. My other parents sent a boarding
He wants to go
school.
somewhere. Let's let him go.
And was that like schoolwork as well too? Was it like a
It was
boarding
a school. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a proper academy where they had a proper, proper.
Yeah.
We call it the cabbage course. That's what we did.
Cabbage course, what's that entail?
Well, just cabbages. That's whatever's in your head. That's what we were taught.
Just 1 + 1 and all
1
that
plus
sort of
1 is
stuff.
2, and not everyone got to 2.
Oh, okay. So, and that's when you started writing.
Yeah.
What was it like? What did you have to learn when you were doing the academy?
To learn to fend for yourself.
Yeah.
It was obviously back in the early 80s, I think it was, or mid 80s when I went in, and it was a proper schoolboy environment. Dormitories, senior boys, junior boys. You were locked in at 8 o'clock at night, and then it was just like
Sounds
mayhem.
like COVID.
Yeah, so you had to learn to fend for yourself pretty quick.
And what was the environment like with that mix of age groups? Like, were the older guys really good in terms of helping you through, or were they very much like...
A bit of both.
Yeah.
As you can imagine. You get different personalities in there, and it was a great boiling pot of everything put together.
Yeah.
Like kids that were struggling, guys that were just thriving, and people that were just somewhere in between. So it was a great... I think everybody fed off each other. It was and everyone sort of asks, what's the South African Jockeys Academy's secret? And I think that's the secret. I think it's the fact they put everybody together in one environment, and like each kid would come home from track work or riding a race, and you'd be sitting on your beds at night talking about what you did. Oh, I rode the horse this way, or I did this, and if you weren't at their level, you'd listen, and if you're worth your salt, you'd try and implement what the successful boys were doing. Yeah. And I think success sort of bred success within that little environment.
Because it's sort of like you were learning more out of the classroom, same in that way, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was open field classroom pretty much.
Yeah. And were there many from your grade that we now see trackside, or or that we did end up seeing trackside?
None here.
Yeah.
None in Australia. Obviously in South Africa there were a few.
Yeah.
And if there's anyone from South Africa watching, I was in with Andrew Fortune, Theo Fenter, there's a couple of them that are no longer with us, but I think Andrew Fortune's the only one who is still active in the racing game.
Yep. Same age group as you?
Same age group, yeah.
Yeah.
So you go in at the same age every year.
Yeah.
They take a group of boys in January at 14 or 15 years old, and then you spend a year there, and then you progress to the second years, and then you have 5 years there.
How good. And what, like, out of that, did you stay racing in South Africa to start with? Because you had a little sampler in Sydney in 2000, wasn't it? Yeah.
So our little foray, because South Africa was pretty much a backwater, and no one really knew what was going on there, and Mauritius was basically our go-to place to go and ride overseas. It was a little island that's only 3 hours off the coast of South Africa, and they've got a mad racing community there. I mean, it's like Everest Day every Saturday.
Oh, no, okay.
It is madly popular on that island. They'd have 10% of the population that would go to the racetrack.
Wow.
So I think they only had 1 million people. I think you would get, on the big day, you get 100,000 people there. And it's tiny. It was 1,200 metres round. It was a little goat track.
And was it like fancy, like what you talk about, like your Sydney, Melbourne? Was it like a country track?
No.
Like, talk to me about...
Country track.
Yeah, okay.
Country track.
And you're riding dirt track, grass track, sand
It only
track.
fit 10 horses on it, from inside fence to outside fence.
And then the rest was just flocks of people.
Yeah.
And what was the racing like in Mauritius?
It was great.
Yeah.
It was such a thrill. I went there when I was way too young.
How young's too young?
I think I was about 23, 24. Came out of my time, was pretty successful there, and then hit the skids and thought, when you let it loose, shackles are off. It was all party time.
Yeah.
Racing was just a job that got in the way of living life. And then I soon got married, had a kid. Soon realised that, hang on a minute, I've got to earn some money here. And then I got a chance to go and ride in Mauritius, which was great. And I spent 4 years there. I had the longest holiday of my life. Met some great people. Rode with some fantastic jockeys that used to come from all over the world. French, Australian, English, so lots of different personalities that were there. And I spent a couple of years there, and then after that, I went back home and cemented myself back at home and started to ride out in Asia. Asia sort of opened up for South African jockeys quite significantly, because there were a couple of jocks that went across there to Hong Kong and Singapore that did really, really well.
Yeah.
And then, fortunately, I got asked to come and ride in Australia, as you mentioned, in 2000.
And what was that like, that moment when they come and, tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, we want you to come and ride in a foreign country, whether it be Asia or Australia?
Yeah, it's pretty, it makes you feel pretty good.
Yeah.
Of course, it's, you're only as good as you can, as your performance.
Yeah.
It was never easy, but I think the South African sort of, the way that we were brought up through the academy, like, taught everybody to really work hard and to do as best as they could. And they didn't sort of tolerate, racing was obviously a lot smaller in South Africa. So if you weren't really making it, you soon got, pushed aside and you realised it wasn't for you.
Would you have done anything else if you hadn't have gone to the Jockey Academy?
Starved, probably.
You starved as a jockey to make weight. So
literally
right?
starved, literally, yeah.
And
a lot of people ask me what I would have done if I wasn't a jockey. I would have probably, what would I have been? I said probably unemployed.
Yeah. So it was that or nothing.
Yeah.
Do you think that was probably one of the biggest keys to your success, was that it's either this or...
It's all I ever wanted to do, really, from when I was a kid. Once I got involved into it, it's all I didn't think of doing anything else.
Yeah.
Like, in my mind, I never ever thought about not succeeding.
Yeah.
Even when I wasn't doing as well as I wanted to do, I always had it in my mind that's what I want. And I believe that your mind is the most powerful thing that you've got outside of your talent. Your mind can take you and make you do things that maybe you doubted you could do. But, if you got the application and the desire, I think you can do anything.
Did you ever have anyone working coincide with you, teaching you how to race and ride a horse, with working on stuff like that, with your mental health coaching, or was that just something that was ingrained in you?
No, there's obviously nowadays it's a lot different. A lot of sportsmen have got their psychological side of things, their sports, their nutrition. We had none of that. Obviously, it was a different era.
Yeah.
You just, it was survival of the fittest, really.
Yeah.
It was sink or swim.
And then to get, as I said, coming over in 2000, I think you were here for about 3 months. Was that about right?
Yeah.
Did you know much about the Australian landscape coming
Had
over,
no idea.
who the trainers were to sort of get involved with. So what was it like for you landing here and sort of going, right?
Well, I think I'd just won a premiership at home, and I got one of my trainers I used to ride for was at the Magic Millions, and one of his friends who was a trainer here had dealings with obviously he had some owners in Hong Kong and saw that a few of the South African boys were doing well over there, and he was looking for a South African jockey, and I was recommended to, anyway, he contacted me, and I eventually made my way over here for 3 months, and it was great. I spent the winter in Brisbane for Bruce McLaughlin, who's sadly no longer with us, and his stable jockey had gone to ride for Gay Waterhouse, so Gay had taken his jockey, Brian York, and I came over and spent 3 months with Bruce and absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Well, you had a few wins that helped you love that time.
I was pretty fortunate there, and I had a bit of success, and then my 3 months was up, and I was going back to take up the carnival time in Durban, which starts in sort of May, June, July.
Yeah.
And from there, I got an invite to go to Hong Kong, so it was a good stepping stone for me. I sort of came over here, had some success, and got invited to go to Hong Kong.
You've raced in some amazing places. I think it was 3 decades, 4 continents, and a Group 1 in over 4 different countries. Yeah. Has there been a country that you've loved racing in the most?
Yeah, I reckon my first time I came to Australia, I loved it because it was pretty much just...
It was by Lacca, right? Is that right?
Lacca.
I think it's good in Afrikaans, just in case you need to know.
Lacca is good, yeah. And I reckon my first time I landed in Australia, I absolutely loved it because Bruce had a farm where he had his own training centre outside of the city limits in Brisbane, a place called Caboolture, which was really rural. Yeah. And I thought everyone in Australia never wore shoes.
we don't.
But no one in Caboolture wore shoes. So that was a bit of an eye-opener, but the racing, I loved it. And then, of course, spent some time in Hong Kong. But the best time I ever had, the longest holiday I had was in Mauritius. I rode there as a young kid. Was probably, most of it went over my head. Yeah. As to what was, because it was so gambling orientated. And
it's not hard for a jockey for it to go over your head, though, is it?
Well, I think at that stage I was just totally unaware of the magnitude of how big it was. I never forget over there. I'll tell you a funny story when I was in Mauritius. And they would, like, the betting would open on a Thursday afternoon, and there were 130 bookmakers on course, and there's 30, like, it was just people everywhere. And so there would only be maximum of 10 horses in a race, and the stable had bought this horse that was working really well, and my first 3 or 4 weeks there, and they want to know from the jockey, which horses are we going to bet on this week? And I had no idea. And I was riding these horses track work, had no idea. Anyway, first 3 meetings, didn't have a winner. And the 4th week, I could see these blokes are getting really edgy. They've paid for me to come over. They're giving me money to be there. And well, fortunately, I had this horse that was running, and I said to them, okay, on Saturday, so the meeting was on Wednesday. I said, right, Saturday, this is the horse you got to back. And they said, back this horse? The horse of the year, the champion racehorse, is in the same race. You're going to beat it? I said, yeah, we'll beat it. He said, okay. Gets on his phone, he starts talking French. He must have phoned his bookmaker to have a bet. And the trainer's sitting next to me, and he says, are you sure this thing's going to win? This bloke's had this massive bet. I said, oh. I thought, in for a
roll
penny.
The dice.
I've been here for a month. I haven't had a winner. It's time to go home, or it's time to stay. Anyway, he gets off the phone, and he says, right, this is what I've backed it to win. And I nearly fell off the chair. I thought, wow.
How much was it?
I can't remember, but it was a lot of money.
Okay.
In rupees, but in rand terms, it was still a lot of money. For today's terms, it's probably not, but I thought, well, if this thing doesn't win, they're going to chuck me in the harbour with a pair of lead shoes. And I said to him, well, if you're going to have a bet, have a decent bet and go and double it.
Oh, wow. So you already knew that was a big bet, and you were like...
Well, I thought, well, I'm either going to sink or swim, yeah? It either wins or it doesn't win. There's no in between. Yeah. Anyway, it won by 3 or 4 lengths. It was horse of the year that year. It was unbeaten, so I was lucky that I landed landed on my feet after a few weeks, and from that point on, everything just went really, really well.
What makes you, as a jockey riding the horses and when training with them, realise that a horse is special?
A lot of people ask that. You can't really tell someone what a horse feels like unless you've felt it. Yeah. It's like jumping in a a shit car, a bucky or a ute, or getting into a Merc or a BM. You can feel the difference when you get behind the wheel and you're driving the thing. Like the thing doesn't bounce over every bump and it just glides along. And when you ask them to go, they quicken smoothly. That's pretty much what a horse feels. Just in a general sense, that's pretty much how they.
And how
feel.
much control from as I said, I'm asking like pretty like not lame but naive questions. How much control do you have as a jockey to control that horse, or is it's its own beast? It'll do what it wants. Like we watch, horses like Winx, when I think Huey tried to ride it the first few times and lead it from the front, and it's like, nope, sitting back here.
Well, I think fortunately for us, all our hard work's done by the breakers and the people that break them in and train them in the mornings. So they're schooled to how they should behave.
Yeah.
And I think when we get on the good ones, they're the easy ones to ride.
Yeah.
The slow ones and the ones that have like quirky problems, they're the difficult ones to win on.
And is it like you talk about having the quirky problems and whatnot? When you're riding it, are you trying to break it again while you're racing it and try and now teach it?
Not really. Most horses you get on, you in a race day, you're gonna get on them for the first time.
Yeah.
It's the first time you've experienced the horse. Most of the time. Sometimes you've had experience with them from a previous ride or maybe at track work, and you get to know them like from the time you get on to the time you got to get down to the barriers, and you got to suss it out. What the horse likes, what it doesn't like, and and you get to learn very quickly. And most horses,
because that's a space of a couple of minutes, really, isn't it? Yeah,
yeah,
that's quick.
But the trainer also tells you, he gives you a snapshot of what to expect from the horse.
Yeah,
and sometimes that's counterproductive. Sometimes they tell you, listen, the horse doesn't like to be boxed in, doesn't want to be locked away. It needs room on the outside, and you end up on the outside, and the horse just doesn't go. And the next time you ride it differently, and so sometimes they can tell you things that are beneficial, and sometimes, there's a great saying: a good jockey doesn't need instructions, and a bad jockey can't follow them.
And which one were you?
Somewhere in between.
I mean, you listen to the news.
A lot of the time, I couldn't follow instructions.
Yeah,
and then you come back and I tell you what, you can get some good sprays. The best sprays ever in the world I've had are on this joint.
Talk to me about the best sprays you've had.
I rode a horse one day. Trainer called Kurt Goldman.
Yeah.
He told me to ride this horse. He says, it was down at Goulburn, so it was a place I don't normally go.
Yeah.
And he puts me on this horse, and he pretty much said to me, look, give it a nice go around. He said, but don't be too hot on it, because in 2 weeks' time, there's a race I think it can win.
Yeah.
In other words...
Warm it up.
Well, not really warm it up, but anyhow, I got to about the 200-metre mark, and the thing was spent. It was like... And I just sat up on it, put my hands on it, I stopped riding it out. It was beaten a long way.
Yeah.
And it got beaten quite a lot. He came back and he absolutely unloaded on me. I looked at him and I said to him, are you finished? Have you had enough? Do you want to go again?
So what did he say? What was the spray about that you didn't ride
I didn't do this right. I didn't do that right. I sat up on it. I was cost at 5 lengths. What's he going to tell his owners? You're a this, you're a that, you're from South Africa, you don't deserve this, you don't deserve that. Go back to where you came from.
How have you found the Australian public now to soaking you up now that you've had such a stellar career here?
I had a bit of a love-hate relationship with as a jockey, you get beat, they hate you.
Yeah.
The next race you win, they love you. That's the punters. But I was very fortunate. I came here pretty late in life. I was in my 40s when I came here.
Yeah.
So it's a late stage to start again in a new country. But I was very lucky. I was well received by the trainers and the owners. Had a lot of success. Very grateful.
What was probably your favourite horse that you've ridden?
Haylist was my favourite horse.
Yeah.
He was just. I could tell you some stories about this. John McNair, who trained him, he was a bushy trainer from Western Australia who came over here. I even said to my manager when I first got here, because John's horses used to do cartwheels in the enclosure, and jockeys used to fall off them and get thrown into the bush. And I said to our manager, one rule, no rides from that bloke. And he puts me on this horse, and I said to him, hey, I fucking told you I don't want to ride with this bloke. He said, you're going to want to ride this horse. And as I got on it in the enclosure and canned it at the barriers, it just felt like an absolute superstar, and he was.
So you regret pushing away those cartwheeling horses earlier then?
No, not the ones not those ones. But this horse was just a super horse.
And what about one that you wish you could have ridden? You can't go for the obvious Winx.
One I wish I could have stayed on. I rode So You Think at his second race start, and he had 52 or 53 kilos. And I ran second on it, got beaten absolute nostril at Ramwick, but both horses broke the track record.
Wow.
And then his next start, Huey Bowman won his first race on him, and then I rode him his second start. And I think had I won on him, I possibly might have stayed on him. But Huey rode him his next two starts and won on him.
Yeah.
And then Huey jumped off it to ride something else. And he went down to Melbourne to run in the Guineas. And Bart, of course, Bart trained him, and Bart put a Melbourne jockey on, and I never got on him again, which was a pity. And then shortly after that Melbourne Carnival, he came back and Bart offered me the choice to ride all his horses, first choice. And at that stage, So You Think was still in Melbourne. And I said, do I get to ride the black horse as well? He said, so actually it wasn't me choosing Bart's horses.
Yeah.
Bart wanted first choice to use me.
Yeah.
So it was one-way street, which I learned very quickly.
And was that hard to sort of have that sort of relationship?
I was only new here, so
yeah.
I had to accept what I was really grateful for those.
Yeah.
And for a guy like Bart Cummings, and I mean a worldwide trainer, to want to use me, I was really chuffed.
Because you've ridden for a couple of different trainers across your time, without playing favourites with your children, was there one that sort of stands out that?
I really used to enjoy riding for Chris Waller.
Yeah.
He was a difficult guy. He's a guy that he does get attached to jockey. Well, he's only attached to one jockey at the moment. That's James McDonald, but he likes to use a lot of different jockeys. And I found that a bit confronting because I like to get involved with the stable and work with them.
Mm-hmm.
But in Australia, they seem to, you work for them instead of you working together.
Yeah.
But I used to enjoy the way Chris prepared his horses. I think my riding style suited his horses. He liked them to be like balanced up early, relaxed early on, and the winning post was there for a reason. I did a bit of riding for Gay when I first got here, and that didn't last all that long. I think my personality and hers clashed a little bit. But generally speaking, there's lots of trainers out there that I really enjoyed riding for. I loved riding for the smaller trainers and winning good races for them.
Yeah.
One was Ronnie Lehman, won the Golden Rose for him and his clients. They had his horse that cost them nothing, and he won a $1 million race for them, and that brought me a lot of joy. Yeah.
And with each different trainer, you talk about their quirks and their perks and whatnot. Who's probably changed you the most in terms of how you see racing and being a jockey? I think
my first boss when I was an apprentice in South Africa, Alistair Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
I was indentured to him for my 5-year apprenticeship. And then, of course, the guy that I had a lot of success with in South Africa, Dennis Dreyer, he was just one of those old school trainers where, if the owners didn't want you on, the horse left the stable,
Yeah.
And he was just like behind you 100%. And I think those two guys, and they had their faults. I think sticking by a jockey when an owner doesn't want you on, I think it's a little bit silly because you can lose the horse.
Yeah.
Whereby you share the rides around a little bit, which is what happens most places in the world. You get a benefit of then being able to ride for other people, so you're not locked into one stable. But and then of course coming here, racing was just so different to what I was used to back in South Africa, and to a large extent it's very similar to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
But it's very different as well.
And where do you think, in terms of where Australia and Hong Kong and that are racing at the moment, where do we sit?
I look at prize money wise. I think Hong Kong is probably a little bit better than Australia on a race day basis. But I think across the board, Australian racing is as good as anywhere I've ever been. It's so good. I'm so blessed to be here and to be part of it, and have a son now that's riding as well.
Yeah, I was about to ask about your son. He's been doing pretty well this carnival.
Yeah. Oh, he's had a bit of a quiet carnival. He's been back from Hong Kong about a year and a half now.
Yeah. Geez, you're a hard taskmaster.
Yeah. He's a little bit like me. He's a little bit hard on himself.
Mm-hmm.
He's not quite as lucky as I. He's not as small as I am. He's quite tall, as most young kids are nowadays. They're a lot taller than when I started.
They
I was
breed them differently, I say, Glyn.
Yeah. Well, I think we like to breed the same way.
Yeah, true.
Feet to feet.
Yeah.
Or maybe not, if that's not your preference.
I was
that's
say,
not your
all.
preference. But yeah, jocks are generally a little bit bigger, and
Yeah.
Chad's obviously, he struggles a bit with his weight. He rode in Hong Kong for 5-6 years there when he was 20. He was I believe he was way too young.
Yeah.
He didn't understand the lands. He grew up in Hong Kong.
Right. Okay.
So he obviously, that was a goal of his to get there. And when he got that phone call, it was like Christmas, Easter, birthday, everything all at once. And he took it with both hands. So yeah, for me to have, an ongoing draw to racing is great.
Because you a few of your son-in-laws or brother-in-laws sort of came into the picture as well too. You well and truly wed into the racing family.
So my wife's sister's husband is a jockey. Her brother was a jockey, is now a jockey manager.
Yeah.
And he's married to Lizzie Jelfs. My two nephews are jockeys, and my son's a jockey. My daughter married a jockey. Unfortunately, alas, he passed away 2 months after they got married, and that's Nathan Berry.
Yeah.
Terrible time in racing, and of course our lives, and of course John, Julian, and Tommy and his sisters.
Because you were racing with Nathan during that time, weren't you?
Well, he'd just gone to take up a contract in Singapore.
Yeah.
And he'd been there a couple of weeks, and he got terribly ill, and that didn't ended tragically, and was a tough time for everybody. Yeah, that was really sad.
Yeah,
really sad. I don't think a lot of us, obviously those close to Nathan and his family, direct family, and obviously us as being indirect, don't think we've ever got over it. It was really sad. I get quite emotional now just thinking about it.
Yeah, and I can understand that. And he made such an eclectic mark on the racing community as well.
Well, of course, there's the Nathan Berry Medal in the championships.
Yeah,
and that's like the sought after jockey gong, for that carnival.
It's an amazing sentiment for an amazing man, and it just, I think during that period and even in the last year as well too, just seeing how close your community really is, and you may compete against each other week in, week out, and 1,000 times a day, but how tight you really all are.
Yeah. Well, of course, there's always the injury aspect of what we do, and the danger side of it, and that's something that none of us ever sort of talk about. It's like there's recently an Italian jockey came over for a stint, and he sadly had a bad race fall, and he lost his life on the racetrack, and it was something that I'd never experienced, a jockey losing his life on a racetrack, until I came to Australia.
Yeah.
I think it's the way the way the jockeys are expected to ride. There's no room between. It's even tighter than they race in Hong Kong.
Right.
And for some reason, there's a litany of deaths on the racetrack and serious injuries, and I personally believe that if there was a way to make it safer, it would happen. But I think the industry is so hell-bent on competitive racing, tough racing, that maybe the safety aspect of it isn't looked at as prominently as it possibly or probably should be. I'm not saying that the industry's wrong.
Yeah.
But the fact that there's so many injuries and so many serious injuries, there's something that needs to be looked at, and maybe some sort of analysis, because it happens too often.
To look at the racing and to know the risk that comes in with being a jockey, and you're saying amplified here in Australia, is it a case of feeling you're invincible until you're not? Like you've obviously got to keep that out of sight, out of mind, but you're aware of the risks at the same time.
Of course you're aware, because it happens all around you.
Yeah.
There's a stat, I was talking to Tony Crisafi, who's our Jockeys Association chairman, and I think he was telling me, it was either last year or this year, the average stat is, if you're a jockey, you're going to be carted to hospital in an ambulance. There's 28% chance of you being carted to hospital in an ambulance in a calendar year. So if there's 100 of you, 28 of you are going to hospital.
Yeah.
So far, I think it was up until the last time I'd spoken to him, it was up to 58%. So one in two of you are going to be taken to hospital in an ambulance. So it's not without its dangers, and it's probably a stat that I was shocked to know.
Yeah.
But it's a stat that's there, and hence we don't have much insurance. We have workers' compensation, but I remember I did a podcast last year, and I asked the question: should jockeys receive the same percentage as trainers, 10%? Because jockeys receive 5% and trainers receive 10%. Well, I got abused left, right, and centre by trainers, by this and that. Jockeys don't deserve this, and jockeys don't deserve that. And we only work 2 minutes on the horse, and we cock them up and we fuck them up, and they've got to take them home and talk to the owners and bandage the horses, and which is fair.
Yeah.
But I made a comment. You can't fall out the grandstand and break your neck.
Yeah.
But
that would have gone down really well too, I imagine.
But that didn't go down well because, of course, there are certain trainers that have been injured. I suppose my comment wasn't quite right, but I think my point was pretty. The point I was trying to make was pretty obvious.
Yeah.
We carry a lot of risk, and I don't ride anymore, so I'm not. I've got no vested interest other than my son, but I certainly believe that jocks deserve to be paid at least the same as a trainer.
Because you had a pretty nasty fall. I think was it 2019? Was it?
I've had loads of.
You've had what's probably been one of the most scariest for you, I guess.
I don't know. I've broken my neck twice, my back 3 times, a couple of arms, a leg. The worst one, the one that hurt the most was I got hit in the face. I broke my nose, cheekbones, eye sockets, palate, jaw. So
you copped the hoof to the face?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the sorest I've ever been. And I'll never forget. It was at trials at Warwick Farm, and the thing kicked me in the face, and I was on the horse, and it bucked when I got on it, threw me in the air before I'd sort of got a hold of it, and as I was coming down, it whacked me in the face.
Like a cartoon.
That's like a cartoon
in my head right now.
Yeah, and then anyway, I come to, and everyone's around me, like all the staff and jocks and all that. Anyway, they sit me up, and obviously my blood's streaming out of my face, and I had a cut on my thumb where I must have landed on the ground, and my thumb, and I had obviously a gash in my thumb, and I looked at I said, "Fuck, my thumb's sore." And someone said to me, "Scoey, you should have a look at your fucking face."
I had a fall off a skateboard and I shattered my ankle. And I just remember I felt my calf tear at the same time, and I was laying on the ground, I was holding my leg, and I was looking at my mates. I was like, oh shit, I was 8 weeks out of my first fight. I'm like, I think I've torn my calf. And they're literally the same thing. I wouldn't worry about your calf. Have a look at your fucking ankle. And my ankle was just like
that way.
Because it's kind of weird. Like you don't feel the worst part.
You
you feel
don't
the part that's probably the least.
Yeah. Yeah. So broken bones are part of the job.
And how's the recovery coming back from races like that? Because it's not just physical. You're having to mentally go, right, I've got, like the saying goes, just got to get back on the horse.
Yeah, I was fortunate. It never occurred to me that next time I get back on a horse, I'm going to get hurt.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe why I had such a long career. I retired when I was 56.
Wild.
So I retired by choice as well, which is... Look, I'm a little bit, now that I'm not active anymore, I've got a few more aches and pains that I thought I had before. But, just the thought of just getting back, making sure that, other jockeys are not going to get on the horses that I wanted to ride, and, making sure you always, as you know, as a sports person, you're always back too soon.
Yeah.
You're always pushing the boundaries. You're always back riding or back competing when you still got that injury.
You can't help yourself.
You just can't help it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And going now from being a retired jockey to kind of being on the other side of the fence, what have been your key notice of difference or points of difference that you've seen? How do you look at the track differently? What's the wise man now say?
Yeah, so I see races from now a spectator's point, because I don't gamble. I don't really gamble.
You just tell everyone else how to.
Yeah.
One of our other podcasts as well too, so make sure you check out the BTFU.
Yeah. And that's going pretty well at the moment with Mace. Yeah, Mace is tipping a load of winners. I tipped 4 from 4 a couple of weekends ago.
Well played.
Which was pretty good. So I'm going to stop there.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking at races from that aspect as opposed to a competing aspect, it's totally different. I mean, you now really see when people get upset with how you've ridden a horse or mistakes you make. It's magnified when you're on the other. It really is. You really see it from a different perspective. So I've garnered a new perspective as to why abuse is shouted at you over the fence.
And are you now that person not abusing? That's probably not the right word to be using. But now the person yelling at the jockey racing, saying they should have been doing this. They should have been doing this at that point. Are you doing that? Is that you, or are you more?
Look, we all can see what if if someone else or yourself has done something wrong and
Yeah.
it's glaringly obvious, it's you don't need someone telling you, hey, you did
Yeah.
this. You know yourself.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want is some bloke who's
That
you don't
has
know,
been. Yeah.
some keyboard warrior, spitting it back in your face. So you feel bad about it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do see, and I can see when, especially when I'm watching and critiquing Chad riding horses, and you can see certain jockeys, they've got a certain way of riding, like Timmy Clark. Put him in front, one of the best in the country.
Yeah.
Put him in the pack, he's not as effective. Huey Bowman, put him in front, he's lost. Put him in behind,
He knows what to do with that
reads
now, yeah.
He reads it like a book.
Yeah.
You know, so there's just two examples of, you know, and as a jock, when you're doing your form, you factor that in as well. You know, if Huey's on a front runner, well, you know, it's probably not going to be ridden to its best because Huey won't dig it up and be aggressive on it.
Yeah.
And vice versa. If Timmy's on a horse that likes to be ridden from the rear, he sometimes lacks that little bit of reading like maybe Bowman would do, but put him in front and that's why him and Gay, they're just like a match made in heaven.
And what's the dynamic like with you and Chad when you just speak about, you sort of give him feedback? I mean, you see the footy world with your Nathan and Ivan Cleary's as coach, or your Brad and Jake Arthur's.
Yeah.
What is that dynamic like at the dinner table? Are you allowed to talk about racing when you sit down, or is it Dad?
You know when Chad first started riding, Chad was, you know, oh, you're Glyn's son.
Yeah. Now it's the other way
Now,
around.
oh, you're Chad's dad. And when it got to that stage, Dad, listen, I know.
100%.
Yeah.
But does he take it on board, or is he?
Look, now he's getting a bit older,
Yeah.
and I want to have a crack at him. He gets a bit cranky, especially if I'm a bit repetitive, which I can be.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you know what? You just want the best.
Yeah.
You just want the best, and you want him to be perfect, which he's never going to be. And
Name me a person who is perfect, though.
well, my wife thinks she is.
You're in trouble. You're in
She doesn't
trouble
watch.
when you get home.
Hopefully, she's not watching it.
I'm bringing the female audience in,
Yeah.
so be careful. What about if we look at the Autumn Carnival that's just wrapped up, what have you made of it? What have you loved about it? I mean, we were talking about critiquing jockeys and whatnot. Everyone has loved Pride of Jenny's race, but everyone else is yelping at the people who allowed it to get into such an open space.
Well, James McDonald. Okay, first of all, Declan Bates. I think we on the BTFU show, the racing show, we mentioned how bold, and it's one of the best. I mean, it was a bold ride.
I won on it, so I was happy.
I don't think he actually. He said he didn't realise he was that fine front, and he didn't have much control over what she wanted to do.
Right.
And that's in response to your earlier question: how much control have you got?
Yeah.
Well, he didn't have that much at all, but the horse did the rest. So he deserves big kudos.
Yeah.
Balls that big to do what he did, because you know if it falls flat and she gets beat, you know he's the fall guy.
Yeah. You've got the
But
owners
then
coming
you come
and
back and
barking down.
you listen to on Sky, you listen to all the beaten jockeys' comments. McDonald walks in and his comment was embarrassing. Well, what was embarrassing? The fact that you let it go that far in front, or the fact that you couldn't catch it? I don't know. I didn't understand what his comment was.
Yeah.
And then, of course, all the other jockeys had their bit to say, and then, of course, Chris Waller was. You could see he was miffed about how the race panned out, but
Yeah.
he wasn't really apportioning blame to anyone. But inwardly, he would be, and of course, that's the class of you know someone like him that just doesn't vent his anger, you know, right there and then. Which a lot of trainers and a lot of owners and a lot of punters and a lot of jockeys do. They express, it's an emotional game. It's it's not like going around for $1.
Yeah.
It was a $5 million race or something, whatever it was. So, so there's a lot at stake. So yeah, you got to take it.
Can't get my words out. Were there any horses that you were really surprised at with not reaching their potential during this carnival?
Yeah, I suppose Storm Boy, the slipper favourite. He looked like he had all the races in front of him. Maybe Learning to Fly, who was touted for big things. She runs this weekend in Adelaide. She just can't draw a barrier. She's drawn wide again. I think definitely Storm Boy. I think he was touted to be the next hot property in the 2-year-old front, which is what our racing's geared all around mostly. But no, I think he was a bit disappointment for me.
Yeah. And what about who you think really shocked you coming in that you was like, meh, and then whoa?
Well, I don't think she shocked me, but I think she just proved how good she is. Jamie Carr. I think she had a Group 1 winner on every day of the carnival.
Yeah.
She came up.
I followed her in a lot.
I remember talking to Ollie a couple of years ago, Damien Oliver, and when she'd moved to Adelaide, from Adelaide to Melbourne, and he said to me, he said, "Wow, man," he said, "this chick can ride." He said, she wins on horses that like the good jocks can't win on. He said she's really good. So she got an endorsement a long time ago from Ollie.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course now the big trainers, they put her on, like Godolphin uses her, Kieran Maher uses her, you name it, everyone's using her. And interestingly, on the flip side of that, Rachel King, she's had some great success. She went and did a stint in Japan before the carnival. Mm-hmm. And it just shows you, if you haven't got momentum going into a carnival, I don't think she rode a winner in the carnival.
Yeah.
Or a winner of note.
Yeah.
So her being away, even though Japan's a very lucrative place to go, maybe the timing, she might think a little bit more about the timing of going to Japan next time.
Is that just a matter of being out of touch with the Sydney?
No momentum going into the, you haven't got, you're not on everyone's lips. You're not winning races week in, week out. So, when they're thinking about putting a jockey on a good horse, you want the jockeys that are foremost in your mind. And if you're not there or you're not riding winners, you just get overlooked.
Knowing what Damien Oliver said and seeing how you saw Jamie Carr ride this season, what do you think has made her the success this season? Like what's been?
She's resilient. She's had some shit thrown at her.
Oh yeah.
Or she's thrown some shit up in the air and it's landed on her. Let's put it that way. But she's resilient. She she was Teflon coated. That's what you've got to be. Mm-hmm. You've got to let the shit bounce, like all the bad stuff bounce off you, and you've got to be focused. You've got to know what you want. And of course, in this game, it doesn't matter what you do wrong within reason. If you apply yourself, you're dedicated, and you're there, you'll get the results.
And the tracks this year, we've had some amazing weather, whether it's been really good or really horrible. We've had some downpours, which is really sad.
But that's Sydney in the
We've
autumn.
Turned into Melbourne though. We've almost had 4 seasons in one day, and it's been wild. But they took a beating. Yeah,
the tracks. That's not the beauty of being a track manager. Who'd want to be? You present them too hard, you get complained at. If you get too much rain, they're too soft. So look, they did really well.
Yeah.
The last day of the championships, the last 2 races got washed out.
Yeah.
Which was no real surprise because the track was pretty
was
deplorable because they'd copped so much rain. But that's normally what happens in the autumn in Sydney.
Yeah. And do you prefer Sydney over Melbourne?
Oh yeah, Sydney. I love the weather. I'm not a cold.
Overlanders is listening.
Yeah. Look, Sydney. Like, I remember. No word of a lie. I remember, I think I said it to Richard Freeman. I did a podcast with him. And when I first came to Australia, Volandis had just been given the job from, I think he was on the trots or the harness racing or whatever it was. And you went into that trainer's hut at Randwick or at Rose Hill, and everyone was like dubious about. I remember one trainer, I'll never forget his comments, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." And I thought, anyway, and then fast forward a few years, the Everest, the first Everest dinner on the Thursday before the race, Volandis got up to speak, and he got a standing ovation from the crowd. And I thought, wow, there's a guy. Talk about Teflon coated.
Yeah,
he just believes it, and he took the bookmakers on. He won. He's taken, whatever he's decided to do, and he's now involved in, a sport you love.
Yeah,
the NRL. I'm not sure how he's perceived there, but it looks from the outside, it looks like, he's done really well. He's taken it to Vegas, given it, another stream of viewership and maybe revenue. I'm not sure what the goal is, but without doubt, if someone's going to get it right, Peter Volandis will.
And do you think Sydney can get better and better as we go? Or?
It's hard to, where's
it hard to
stop?
imagine, yeah.
There has to be a limit. There's only so much money that the industry can generate. But you know what?
It's attracting internationals and all of them. We're not just seeing the same Australian trainers now. We're even getting the jockeys.
There's a flip side to that. There's a flip side to that because the Melbourne Carnival, especially the Melbourne Cup, has lost its Australian uniqueness because it's so heavily geared towards the international raider. I suppose Sydney's going some way towards that model of inviting all these international horses over. And of course, we've got races like the Tancred, which is 1.5 miles, $3 million. The BMW, which used to be the BMW. We've got the Queen Elizabeth, $5 million race. We've got all these sprint races that are, there for, and of course we've got the Golden Eagle, all these races with multi-million, and they're attracting international runners. So, we've got a risk of doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think having local horses that the punters and local racing people can identify with is certainly something that I think they've got to keep.
We've got a while in hibernation before we come back out for the spring carnival, but in between that time, what trainers and horses and jockeys should we be looking out for?
Well, I think it's the usual suspects. I think you've got Kieran Myers, Moody's, Mick Price, Chris Waller, Godolphin, Gay Waterhouse. I'm forgetting some. I know I am.
Yeah.
Joe Pride always pops up with a big race winner. If I've forgotten you, sorry. And of course, in the jocks in Melbourne, it looks like there's a really young crowd coming through. Sydney, there's obviously a younger crowd. You've got James McDonald, who's dominant here at the moment. You've got Timmy Clark. You've got Chad. Hopefully, can have a better carnival.
Yep.
Don't forget, he's won a Cox Plate as a teenager. So he's still got that. He's got a big hill to climb. But you know what? Any jockey can grab a good horse.
Yeah.
You look at Declan Bates, that Pride of Jenny. It's probably going to change his life. He definitely deserves a lot more opportunities than he's had.
I think it's wild. I mean, I got my first opportunities. How I started enjoying racing was I got asked to go and MC at Warwick Farm, and it was like a really intimate room in the old stables. And Bjorn Baker and Chris Waller were the two that I got to interview. And
God, Bjorn Baker would have been 3/4 of the interview. And Chris Waller would have been that long.
It was so good. So
you can't shut Bjorn up.
Well, and it was brilliant because I got word that Waller loves his Brisbane Broncos.
I thought you were going to say loves himself.
No, we're all friends here. So a friend of mine had said, speak to him about that. That'll soften him before you get him up on stage. And then all I got told with Bjorn was grab him a beer. Yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. They're my two hot tips. Anyway, I did all this research, and it was, I think it was just before, maybe a couple of races before Winx was wrapping up, but maybe 1 or 2 races beforehand. So we get up there and I'm like interviewing, having a chat, it's all going well. And I was like, well, at the moment, I guess the biggest question is all the other trainers saying we want it to be a fairy tale, like the first one who beats Winx in the last race is going to be like shooting Bambi. And Waller has just stopped and just stared at me, and he's like, Huey Bowman's daughter's named Bambi? And I'm just like, everyone in the room just sort of started snickering and started feeling awkward, and I've just grabbed the mic, put it down on my chair, and I was like, everyone, Chris Waller will be running the rest of the interview. Bjorn Baker will be in very shortly. Thank you so much for having me. And I was just mortified. He's like, come back here. He's like, it's all right. And I literally had Chrissy Bowman the next week at the women's, it was like an all women's race day. And I was like, you're interviewing Chrissy. I'm like, oh God, what if she's heard that I made that horrible joke and that was her daughter? And I get up and she's Irish, so apologies for my bad Irish accent. So Chrissy, I'm just going to, get rid of the elephant in the room. I was interviewing Chris Waller last week and I said beating Winx. She goes, oh, that's right, like shooting Bambi. That was you, lass. Oh. She goes, no, that's fine. It was a horrible accent. I'm going to stop now. She's like, oh, it's totally fine. She goes, oh, it was hilarious. Chris told us about this girl who literally just wanted the wall to swallow her up.
Just hold on while I take my foot out of my mouth.
Yeah, I had both feet in there. And then I was lucky Bjorn was straight after and I grabbed him I think it was a Superdry or something off the table. And I was like, Bjorn, I've been told that I need to keep you hydrated when I was on here. And the sponsors were in the club. He's like, this is my favourite beer, rah, rah, rah. He walked out with cartons of beer in his back pocket basically because they're like, we'll drop it off. And he looks at me and he goes, I like you. We're going to be friends. So Bjorn, we need you on the show soon. But that was my injection to racing and just how wonderful the racing world was that went, you're not from here. It wasn't, you can't sit with us. It was, how can we teach you?
Yeah.
How can we make you learn? And that was one thing that I've really loved about our chat today is you haven't looked at me with any question that was dumb or anything along those lines. And I've learned a lot sitting with you. And I think you've had an incredible career on the track. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what more that you can offer from the lounge and letting us know what to look out for across the carnivals.
Well, that's great. It's been great to sit here and relay a few stories.
Bailaka?
Yeah, Bailaka.
Yeah, Bailaka. I feel like you haven't told me everything about Mauritius yet.
No.
There's well more in there.
I got a string of them, but I'll tell you one funny story. So the bloke that was that owned the stable that put all the money on for the the gambling money. He bought this horse that was really expensive. Anyway, it was due to run, and I told him, bang, the single win on Saturday. And the betting comes out, and it's favourite. And he said, we can't back it. It's too short. And I said, no, what do you mean you're too short? You just got to back it. He said, no. He said, do something with it tomorrow morning. Gallop it round the track or do something. It was Friday morning or whatever it was before the race day. I get on it to go and give it a canter, and I come out under the tunnel, and it's dark, but there's people everywhere, cameras flashing. And I'm trotting it and bouncing it in the saddle like this, and it stumbled and it fell over and did a cartwheel. I went flying one way. Horse rolled over, got up, galloped down the track. The trainer ran down the track, caught it, and was walking it back, and the cameras were going crazy. Of course, he was hot favourite. Yeah. And I just walked up to him and like rubbed my hand on the horse's knee, and there was a bit of blood.
Got his dust off.
Yeah, he was a bit dusting his knees off, but there was a bit of blood there. And of course, the cameras picked it all up. The thing blew in the bedding. The stable owner phoned me. He says, "How did you do that?" He said, "That was magnificent. Well done."
But he thought it was staged.
He thought I did it on purpose. I said, It was
an accident.
It was an accident that happened, and then eventually the horse won.
Yeah.
It was just too good.
So
But
it was well played.
Funny story. And then of course they used to make me ride track work in a diving, those big lead weights
The weight belt,
diving
yeah,
belt.
I dive.
A 40-kilo diving belt to ride track work to slow the horses down, because they wanted you to like not show everybody how well they're working.
Yep.
And make them work on the bridle, and they were always clocked, and I just couldn't help myself. I wanted to let them work well, and they said, we'll slow the horses down, we'll just put more weight on him.
We'll slow the horse down by slowing you down and keeping you
I think
in
that's
the
maybe
saddle.
why I didn't grow. I was
Oh, that's
stunted.
what happened.
That was what it. Maybe I should have tried that with Chad.
Understand. I was going to say, you're saying Chad's a bit too
Yeah.
tall. You also said the nephew's looking like he's going to be tall as
Yeah,
well too.
yeah.
So maybe the dive belts.
Yeah, maybe that might work. Yeah, less shit in your shoes. No more manure in the shoes.
Yeah, they're also good. All right. Well, thank you so much.
It's great.
Don't forget, we have heaps of podcasts across our BTFU network. If you want to catch up with the footy, of course, we have some new shows on there with Darcy Lussick, Rennie Matua and Big Les. But thank you so much for joining us at the Show with No Name.